Well, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. Welcome to the Philanthropy Club of Chicago's September presentation. Many of you probably know this, but the club was founded about 20 years ago by Gus Wilhelmy, who was the co-founder of the Safer Foundation. Each of us who presents is part of a volunteer group who are willing to share a little bit about the work that we do and engage a lot of individuals like yourself in this process and make Chicago and the region a better place. My name is Bill Lynerd. I joined the Field Museum just about a year ago after taking a very brief early retirement. And I oversee the Air Society here, which is the Plant Giving Society. And I also do some major gifts work. And my co-presenter today is Bob Shafis, a name that's probably known to almost all of you here in Chicago. He's been around for a long time, I think since the beginning of time, and I'll let Bob talk about himself. You'll need to unmute, Bob. There you go.
Yes, I have been here since the beginning of time. I was at the Lutheran Church in St. Louis for the first 10 or 11 years of my career, and then I came to Chicago. I was the National Director of Planned Giving at the Alzheimer's Association, and then I worked at the Museum of Science and Industry in the Field Museum. And over the past, I also worked at the Salvation Army for a few years, and then for the past 5 years, I've been consulting and am moving rapidly to a late retirement as opposed to the early retirement that Bill just referenced. And so that's me. I've been here for a long time, and virtually every point in that career has been in planned giving. So I've been working in that area for a long time.
Well, it's great. It's great to be presenting with Bob. Just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, is my screen showing? Jennifer or Key, is the presentation showing? Great, perfect. Also, if you would just take some time and introduce yourselves in the chat, that would be great. And then along the way, put any questions you have in, and we will, at the end, try to go back and capture some of those questions. One more housekeeping thing is I've been admitting people into the presentation. Jennifer or Key, is somebody else going to do that now in case people join? I'm still getting the opportunity to admit people, so I will try to do that as well as present. So here's a brief introduction of what we're going to do today. We've already done the introduction. We're going to talk about the plan giving programs and some of the essential elements of creating a great program. Bob is going to go through some definitions of some of the instruments. We'll talk about the plan giving platforms that are out there. There are several of them. We'll touch on marketing. We'll give a couple of real life examples, and then we'll engage you in some questions. So
hey, Bill, before you start, I just want to let you know I don't see the presentation on my screen.
Oh,
but that's okay. If you just tell me what slide you're on, I can go from there.
Okay. Justin, you're able to see my presentation?
Yes, yep.
And
Absolutely.
others are. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk for just a second about the relationship cycle. This is something that each one of you is familiar with. This is how we work in philanthropy. You know, we work to find people who perhaps have an interest. They are aligned with what we do in our organizations. We do our best to cultivate them and engage them in some way. At some point along the way, we engage in a solicitation with them. And then if we do our jobs really well in stewardship, it becomes what computer scientists call an infinite loop, and they continue to be with us and engage in other programs along the way. So that's kind of the essence of the relationship cycle. When you're doing, and what we do, of course, is development, not fundraising necessarily. Fundraising is much more of a short thing. It might be a phone call from a call-a-thon or something like that, and you do all of this in the course of a very short period of time. But what we do is formulate really long-term relationships. So we're going to talk about the integration of planned giving and regular giving, current giving. As you can see by this image, it's on the screen. This is a river, two rivers in Venezuela. And on the right-hand side, it's a lot murkier than it is on the left. The left side represents current giving, annual fund. It's usually pretty straightforward. It covers most things like salaries and the operation of the organization. Planned giving on the other side, on the other hand, is like major gifts. It's a lot less clear, and it takes a lot of work to get people to engage with you in a planned giving a relationship. But in the end, they both come together to create just a wonderful future for the organizations that we serve. And it's really important to do both. So, Bob, I'm on the key points slide.
I solved the problem. I can see it now.
Okay, perfect. Great.
Yeah. So let's, I'll just start it talking about a few things. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is one of Bill's colleagues, Charles Katzenmeier. And Charles at the Field Museum taught me the importance of stewardship in any relationship regarding philanthropy, but especially in terms of planned giving. Because one of the things that you find out is that people who do plan gifts can revoke them for the most part. And you want to make sure that they keep feeling loved and they keep feeling like they're part of the organization. And they are also very motivated by what's most important to them about the organization, not about the tax benefits or any of those type of things, but rather about the ability of the organization to actually implement the mission that it promises it can implement. And the stewardship part of that whole practice becomes important. Of course, one of the things about stewardship in a major gift context is you can say to somebody, well, let me show you what your money is doing. And you can't really do that with a planned gift where it's going to take place later in time, usually when the person passes away. So what you really want to do is show them what their money will do, either by explaining to them how you currently use testamentary gifts, or by showing them some specific examples of how testamentary gifts were used. And one of the things, too, that recent studies show is that people who enter into a planned gift relationship increase their annual giving rather substantially. One of the studies that the planned giving expert Bill shows is that the increase in actual annual giving is somewhere in the area of 60 to 70% within the 5 years after somebody enters into a planned gift. So those are really important things to remember about the entire stewardship process. Keeping people engaged assures that they won't revoke their gift and increases their annual giving.
And some of the other things that that are listed here that I'm sure most of you do already, but it's really important to make sure that the people who are contributing to you and those who are considering a planned gift are confident that you're going to be here, because obviously a planned gift most often is an estate gift. And you want to make sure that 10, 20 years or however long that is before they leave this world, your organization is still going to be impacting people in great ways. And so when I talk with people about giving to the future of the Field Museum, I talk about the impact of what gifts are current gifts are having, but I also align with them how that gift will help us in the future. And you know this already, it doesn't always work this way, but begin your planned giving program with the people who are already contributing to you, because those are the ones who have expressed an interest in what you're doing. Don't overlook volunteers. That's such a key element. If you've got volunteers at the Field, we have about 500 of them, and there are a huge number of those individuals who have entered into a planned giving relationship with us. So yeah. Bob, anything else you want to touch on this screen before we move on to
Yeah, sure.
some definitions?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the volunteers. When I have worked where there are volunteers, which are the two museums, especially that I worked at in Chicago, they really were no different than people who've been giving for a long time. They simply view their donations as their time. And usually, when they're a volunteer to an organization, that's almost the definition of passion for the mission of the organization. So those really are incredibly important people. The other thing, going back to your point about people who are already donors, there's kind of a myth, I think, that plan giving is about old people. And so when I worked at, actually it was the Museum of Science and Industry, I had a researcher who would come in and say, hey, I found this really rich old person who's never given to us. Let's give it to Shafis because he's the plan giving guy. And that was not a good relationship to work with. You want somebody who's been giving for a long time, not only currently, but if you can show that they started giving 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago and are still an active donor, those are some of your very best plan giving prospects.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I'm here in Seattle. I was doing a couple of donor visits, one with a person who is doing a planned gift, and then another young couple who just did a $25,000 gift for us. And to my surprise, at dinner last night, they said, you know, you might not think this, but we just had a young child and we're now thinking about our estate because of her, and we want to talk with you. So you never know where those relationships are going to lead and who is going to be. So when you're creating a plan giving program, it's important to make sure that you create something that's going to recognize the people, and it can be done in whole lots of ways. You can have a formal society that has a annual gathering. We won't go into all of those things, but make sure that the people who are entering into a plan giving relationship with you feel very special. And Bob mentioned the integration of plan giving and current giving, and the fact that when somebody enters into a gift, very often their annual giving increases. There are some people who, and I've encountered many of these people, but some who want to replace their annual giving by saying to you, okay, I'm going to give to you in my estate, so don't ask me for a current gift. It may happen, but it's not going to happen that much. But be careful not to encourage people to do that. So Bob is going to talk through some of the plan giving instruments. Again, many of you know what these might be, but I'm going to turn it over to Bob and let him chat.
Yeah, let's go over this rather scary looking list. And I'm going to focus on the fact that at the top it says bequests are 90% of plan gifts. And that is absolutely correct. 90% of plan gifts come from not only bequests, but the first 3 or 4 things on this list. Life insurance distributions from somebody who made you a beneficiary of a life insurance policy and then passed away. Increasingly, retirement fund designations. I mean, most people, in terms of the assets that they have that are cash or investments, tend to have them in retirement funds. And so retirement fund designations are becoming increasingly popular as a way to make a planned gift. There are a few tax reasons, which I won't get into, but one of the nice reasons when you're talking to a donor is this isn't going to cost you anything. You don't have to go to a lawyer and spend $200-300 to have a will or some other type of estate plan done, which can be a lot more costly than that. But you can go to whoever your retirement plan manager is and say, I simply want to execute a new beneficiary designation for my retirement plan. Another popular way to make a gift at the moment is by gifts of property, especially real property. And there are a couple of ways to do this, both revocable and irrevocable. There is an irrevocable retained life estate where somebody executes a deed, right? And that is, once again, something that can be done relatively cheaply with the use of an attorney. In Illinois, there's also a revocable way of doing this, a revocable deed at death, which allows somebody to create a charitable gift of real estate that does not take effect until death and is fully revocable until death. So much like a bequest or a life insurance beneficiary designation or a retirement fund beneficiary designation, it's fully revocable. Now we get into the other things that are basically not revocable, and you may or may not be equipped to do these type of things. Charitable gift annuities are rather popular. They have to be done through some type of charity. I have some clients in Canada at the moment, and in Canada, you can set up this type of thing with a financial institution. You can't do that in this country. It's a type of charitable bargain sale, and so the money has to be given to a charity, which then promises in return to make payments to them. Donor advised funds have become very popular. They're not really a planned gift in the sense of setting up something that takes place when you pass away, but they are very popular as a tax planning item and tend to be done either through community foundations or some of the large investment firms that have set up charitable arms, such as Fidelity. Charitable lead trusts, charitable remainder trusts, tend to be done with trust management institutions such as banks and trust companies and that sort of thing. Charitable remainder trusts apply to a relatively small segment of people. They're very useful for relatively large gifts. I know I was talking to one of the banks in Chicago not long ago, and they basically don't want to look at these things unless you're talking about $500,000 to $750,000 or more, which, if you're talking about real estate or a business, is not unlikely. Charitable lead trusts tend to be a little more of a estate tax planning item. And at the moment, the estate tax, I don't know if you know, for an individual is something in excess of $12 to $13 million before you have to even worry about estate taxes. And for a married couple, it's double that. So really, charitable lead trusts have been applying to an increasingly small number of people. I say that. The law that set that up is set to expire next year, at the end of the next year. And so estate taxes could become an issue for a lot of people again. So just kind of keep that on your radar screen. And then finally, pooled income funds, which were really popular in the 80s and 90s, and then really stopped being popular in the 90s and thereafter because they did not pay out a huge amount of income to the donors. And so pooled income funds exist as well. So those are the things that are out there. Go to the next slide. So with regards to charitable gift annuities, like I said, it tends to work best when you're at an organization that has made a commitment to create a large gift annuity fund. Now, I have done a lot of presentations, and a lot of people have come up to me and said, well, you know, Shafis, you work for an organization that has a huge fundraising operation. For me, it's just me and my secretary. How do I do a charitable gift annuity? And the answer might be you probably shouldn't, although you should check with things such as a local community foundation. If it's a religious-based charity, a lot of religious-based charities have national charitable foundations which manage gift annuities. So you have some options there. With regards to donor advised funds, like I said, if you're working with a donor who wants to create a donor advised fund, you should probably talk to a local community foundation or to one of the large investment companies such as Fidelity to see what they're offering in terms of donor advised funds. Just as a side comment, they're on the one hand very popular. On the other hand, the government seems to be constantly looking at ways to regulate them, make them less useful for donors. And part of that is really based in a misunderstanding of what a donor advised fund is and how it really works. But just be advised that donor advised funds are always a little on the edge of being regulated more by the IRS or by the Internal Revenue Code. And I mentioned charitable lead trusts and charitable remainder trusts. If you're working with a donor who especially has land or a business that they're interested in considering making part of a charitable gift, these are the type of things you should say to a donor. Hey, you really ought to talk to your professional counsel about one of these types of trusts to see if it works for you.
Right. So, you probably are familiar with any number of plan giving platforms that are out there. These are just four of them. I use Stelter at the Field Museum. I've had some conversations with the folks at Free Will and Pantera, and I think Bob has a lot of experience with Crescendo. You use these in various ways. We use Stelter to do a mailing in the spring, and in the fall, every couple of years, we do a survey. This past spring, we did a survey to about 10,000 individuals, and surprisingly, I got 1,000 responses. And those responses range from, I'm interested in hearing more about gifts that will benefit me, or I'm thinking about including the field in my estate plans, or we've already made provision. It covered a really big range of responses. And then there are on their platforms, there are tools that you can use. If you go onto the Field Museum's website, for example, you can do a calculator that'll tell you how much your tax deduction will be if you set up a charitable gift annuity or a remainder trust, or using any of those instruments. And those can be very helpful tools. Bob, did you want to say anything about your experience
Yeah,
with these?
I'll go ahead and just say Crescendo tends to be a little more focused on its software, on its calculating software. And their websites even are a little focused on those things at the bottom of that list of gifts that I told you about, gift annuities, charitable remainder trusts, and the like. One of the things that's important with any of these things is making sure that the donor knows that the best way to do so, the easiest to understand in terms of how to make a charitable gift, is to make a gift through your will. So if you're looking at various options, make sure that you always provide the donor with a suggested form of bequest that they can take to their professional counsel. Stelter is not really involved on the software calculating side. They're really a very focused marketing firm. But the surveys that Bill just mentioned are probably the most productive thing I have seen in plan giving marketing in the past 20 or 30 years. So take a look at those very carefully. The type of responses that Bill just referenced are entirely typical of what I'm seeing with regards to surveys. When I used to do, even at the Field Museum, a newsletter on plan giving, and if I got a 0.5% or 0.75% return, I was doing backflips. Now you're seeing these survey processes getting 8, 10, 12% return. And that's the type of thing that makes these surveys so incredibly effective, at least at the moment. I mean, it may be the kind of thing that in a few years it's being done so frequently that people won't respond in the same way. But right now, doing a plan giving survey is a great way to find out if somebody's done something or if they're interested.
And we're both happy to talk with you offline if you want to get into the weeds on our experiences with these. So, okay, well, let's talk about how to launch a program and how to make sure that you're doing the things that actually are productive and get people in the door. As we mentioned earlier, it's best to start with people who are close to you, with the volunteers, with your trustees or board members. And because, okay, I'm having all kinds of troubles here with my earbuds. Okay, now back to normal. Again, starting with people who are contributing, who have invested, who have already aligned themselves with you in one way or the other. It's great to begin some conversations with them, either by sending them materials about the plan giving, or giving them, in your conversations with them, talk about the impact of somebody who's already done this. And in a little bit, we'll give you some examples, and I use them all the time with people with whom I'm talking. So, and then I'll let Bob talk about the things that you might use.
Yeah, I'll I'll just start blathering on here. Number one, yes, start with your board and your volunteers and with your donors. It says here, focus on age 45 or older. And this kind of goes into that thing I mentioned earlier about is plan giving for old people? Actually, the studies show that most people create their first will between 40 and 45 years old. And they create their first charitable gift in their will between 50 and 55. So getting to people when they're relatively young is an important factor in making sure that you have a good pipeline of plan gift donors over the course of time. One of the things I have said my entire career is that the best prospect for a plan gift is somebody who's already done a plan gift, even to your own organization. So as time goes on, if you've begun the discussion of somebody who's 45 years old or younger, and they've done something in their plans, when they get into their 60s and 70s and 80s, they're going to be some of your very best plan giving prospects. How do you go ahead and then create a marketing? What are the things that you need to do is really think in terms of having a marketing plan. So, what are you going to do each year? And not only in the next 12 months, but probably the next 5 years. Plan giving is not a short-term, quick fix type of fundraising approach. It's a long-term investment. And if you know that you're probably not going to see any responses, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You're probably not going to see any dollars and cents results for 7 to 9 years. And that the bulk of the plan gifts that you're working on are probably going to come in the 10 to 20 year range. You need to make sure that your plan giving program is a marketing strategy for the long term. Newsletters to select groups, the more targeted you can make those, the better. One of the distinctions that I see rather frequently, especially in the crescendo stuff, is the difference between newsletters to donors and newsletters to professional advisors. And since professional advisors are an important group for your plan giving program, you should not overlook those. Bill already mentioned the surveys. I think that these are incredibly important. Website, you should have a website that is easily accessible. If you put something in your printed materials and it says, well, please find out more about plan giving by typing in fieldmuseum.org/donate/plan giving nobody does that. But what is becoming important is the use of QR codes to take people directly to the website and directly to the part of the website that you want them to visit. Bill, I want to say Bill James. That's not right. Bill James is a baseball guy. Anyway, there's a plan giving chap who has done some studies, and one of the things that they show is that the phrase "gifts through wills" is the best way to get people to discuss making a planned gift. So anything you can do that you put in your website, if you can use the phrase "gifts through wills," that will be a very important factor in making sure that you are getting the best possible prospects. Free will and or trust services, I would look at those very carefully. They're becoming very popular. I have discussed with some lawyer friends of mine that there are some issues here about whether or not you are helping your donors get their own independent counsel and advice, or if you're directing them to something that is going to ask them to make a gift to your organization with the guise of it being an independent analysis of their estate for will purposes. So look at that very carefully. Make sure that lawyers within your organization are taking a look at that. Estate planning seminars, plan giving seminars, I had a lot of success with those in the 80s at the Lutheran Church. And part of it, I think, was because people tended to trust people from the church. When I went to the Alzheimer's Association and I tried to do these same type of seminars, nobody showed up until I was able to rebrand them as estate planning seminars for families facing Alzheimer's disease. And then I had people coming out of the rafters. it was really interesting. I was working in downtown Chicago on the north side, and we had a blizzard. It was on January 15th, sometime in the earlier mid 90s. And we had this seminar scheduled. And so it took us like, I don't know, 2 hours to drive from Michigan Avenue to Evanston. But when we got there, there were still 50 or 60 people who showed up, who came in through the blizzard to see this presentation. My point is, the more you can personalize an estate planning seminar to your organization, to its mission, to what is important to the donors, that's all important. And then finally, the whole social media piece is something that is constantly expanding. There are ways of utilizing search services to help focus people in your direction. There's a lot of use of various types of other social media platforms. So this is kind of a growing and expanding area, and we will see where this goes. A couple of things that aren't mentioned there, just real quick, are phone numbers and texting. I'm finding more and more people doing more and more fundraising by texting their donors as opposed to sending them emails or doing some other type of contact.
That's great, Bob. So in terms of recognition of the people who engage with you on a planned gift, at the field we have what's called the Ayer Society, AYER. As some of you may know, Edward Ayer in 1893 was the person who convinced Marshall Field to give the original $1 million. He said to him in a meeting one day, Marshall, you know, in 25 years, nobody's going to remember who you are, what you did. They might remember that you sold clothes and things like that, but if you really want to have an impact, you should do something to benefit the larger community in Chicago. And Field threw him out, and then took him down to see the 1893 exposition. And after that, he gave the $1 million, and then subsequently $8 million within a couple of years. And that's the equivalent of about 225 now. And that was the history of the field. So we chose that name. I didn't. It was chosen many, many years ago to recognize people who do things like that for us. And we have an annual luncheon that we invite people to. We give them certain donor benefits. They can contact us and get a behind the scenes tour. And you can figure out whatever it is within your organization that really appeals to people in terms of a society. And then you need to determine how formal you're going to be in terms of how that recognition takes place. Are you going to just say, okay, if you tell me that you've left the universe or left the organization in your estate plans, you're a member? Are you going to require some kind of formal documentation, or are you going to require a copy of the will? We have what's called an estate gift confirmation form, and I'm happy to share that with anybody. It's a one-pager, and it gives them the opportunity to be very specific or partially specific about what their intentions are and how they want the funds to be used. And then we also include people who have made a charitable gift arrangement, whether it's a charitable gift annuity or remainder trust or any of those kinds of instruments. And then finally, like, we do a luncheon, but figure out what works for you and what works for the individuals who are interested in you. And Bob can talk a little bit more about this.
Sure. You know, one of the things I think it's important is to let people know why they should belong. What is going to be the benefit to them of telling your charity that they've done something in their estate plans. And I think that I'll call them tchotchkes, a pen with your name on it, a lapel pin, things like that. Those are things that people throw in drawers. That's not what people want in terms of benefits to an organization. They want, as Bill said, some ability to see the behind the scenes things that are going on at the organization. I had a lot of success at a couple of organizations having small private breakfasts with the president, and people loved them. They would come. They weren't fundraising focused per se. They were about what was going on at the organization. People like backstage access. And then, I have found more and more people not wanting their names listed. I don't know what you're finding, Bill, but especially online. So one of the things that I have, advised clients to do, and I did in my own practice, is to give people an opportunity to tell us how they want to be listed, whether they want to be listed, if they want to be anonymous, or whether they simply don't want anybody to know anything about their situation.
Yeah, true. I would say in the Air Society, maybe 5% of the individuals want to remain anonymous. The others,
Mhm.
they don't mind. So, but it'll be all over the place for you. You just have to make sure that you work with them and that you make it clear to the rest of the folks in your organization that these are anonymous, because you don't want to have somebody accidentally list somebody and then you lose that person's confidence and their future funds. So we wanted to talk for just a second about some real life examples. Bob has some from his experience. I have one that I really love to talk about. It's a large one, but I think it's important in that it represents the long-term nature of this. When I was working years ago at a university in New York, we were working with a faculty member who had a number of patents on a $10 million bequest. And so I left the university, and about 10 years later, I saw in the news that he had passed away, his wife had passed away, and that $10 million, because of where he had invested it with this gentleman we all know called Warren Buffett, it became $100 million. And the person who was in that role when that came through was quite heroic, even though it was somebody else's work that put that in place. In fact, somebody's work before I started there. And it's an indication that you never know what's going to happen with some of these estate gifts. And you will be endlessly surprised, maybe you are already, that people who are seemingly your average individuals can accumulate some very, very generous estates. And if you are one of the principal beneficiaries, it makes a remarkable difference and sometimes is transformative.
Yeah, let me give you an example of a situation where we actually used a planned gift to solve a problem. And the problem is a good problem to have, but a donor had given, and I'll just use some rough figures, $1 million for an endowment for a specific program. And so that spun off about $50,000 a year, which is a nice amount of money. Unfortunately, as the program expanded, it became a situation where it was costing about $75,000 a year. So there was a $25,000 deficit with regards to the gift, the gift and the actual cost of the program. So we worked with the family of the donor. The donor's family consisted of his widow and his children. And the children and the widow agreed that while mom was still around, they would give an additional major gift each year for the difference between what the endowment was spinning off and what the program actually cost. And that when mom passed away, she was going to leave another sum, let's say another $1 million, which would now allow that endowment to spin off $100,000 a year, which would be more than enough to take care of the actual cost of the program. I'm just using rough numbers, obviously, but it was a situation that worked out beautifully because the family got major gift charitable income tax deductions each year. And then the organization got an additional funding of the endowment to make sure that the endowment actually worked for the purposes that the original donor wanted funded.
Yeah, and these are some larger numbers, but all all contributions are important, and all estate gift contributions are really important regardless of the size. And don't overlook people who are making very, very modest contributions. One more example, when I came to the field last year, there was an individual who was basically, her largest gift was $300, but she had made provision in her estate plans for $250,000 for us. Passed away last September. I contacted her attorney when I got there, and the attorney said, well, things have changed and your portion is now $940,000, which was just wonderful news. But it just reminded me that don't just look at the people who are making very large contributions or who are really well known. You will be very surprised at the ability of very frugal individuals to accumulate good estates. So here are some things that we love statistics. So Bob, why don't you launch into this?
Yeah. Hey, the guy I keep talking about is Russell James, not Bill James. Like I said, Bill James is the baseball statistician. Russell James is the plan giving expert. And Russell James has an interesting stat which shows that more or less about 50% of people have some sort of estate plan. This is not inconsistent with what it says here, because about 30 to 40% of people have some sort of will, which means that 70% don't have a will. But then an additional percentage have some sort of revocable living trust arrangement, which means that your market for working with people is kind of a twofold market. One is getting people who've done something already to either identify that they've done something to you so you can steward them, or to get them motivated to change their existing plans to include you for the same reason. The other half of your market is the 50% of people who don't have anything. And it isn't necessarily a situation where rich people have estate plans and people with less don't have estate plans. In fact, there was a person at one of the big banks in Chicago who said to me once, Bob, you'd be surprised how many of the wealthiest people in Chicago don't have a will. Well, if that's true, then you really have a great opportunity to work with a lot of people who are wealthy people who support your organization. The typical plan gift is much, much larger than any type of individual gift that's given in a year. 45 bequests, percent of bequests are completed by people under the age of 55, which goes back to what I said earlier. Now, once somebody has done that sort of thing, you know, somebody who's 55 years old at the moment, their life expectancy is in the 35 to 40 year range. So you're going to have a long-term time to work with these people to not only keep whatever charitable bequests that they have done, but also to motivate them to make larger bequests over that course of time. We already mentioned that 90% of bequests 90% of planned gifts, testamentary gifts, come from bequests. That also has a little bit of a skewing if you're working with an organization that has, for example, a large gift annuity fund, or works with a lot of charitable trusts and things. But basically, that is true. And not only is that true, most of those gifts come from people who you don't know about. They're either people who have never told you that they've done anything, or they're people who are actually not even on your database. So that goes back to my first comment, which is, what is your market? These are the people that you are trying to find so you can steward, so you can keep them happy and close to the organization. And statistics have consistently shown that older widows and widowers and single women are more likely to do a planned gift than somebody who is younger, married, has a number of children, things like that.
So as I think we both emphasized, when you've got a really good plan giving program and you've thought about carefully integrating that with your other program, it does not go in competition with the major gifts that you're having already. There are some, as I mentioned earlier, who will say, well, I'm not going to give you a lot right now, but I'll give you a lot when I pass away. But don't be afraid of creating a plan giving program and thinking that you're going to suddenly decimate your ongoing. Most of the plan gifts that I have worked with have been connected with people who are regular givers. You will find that people who give consistently to you are more likely than people who maybe make one gift at a time. And then the whole idea of bringing out this hidden constituent group, it is so true. It'll bring people out who are just very minor contributors to you, but who have been very careful in their lives. They've accumulated things. They may or may not have children. I've had people say to me, you know, my kids are well taken care of, so I'm going to do something for the organizations that I've been supporting. And then again, gifts, plan gifts are typically much greater than what people will give during their lifetimes.
I'll just make a comment too that, you know, once again, I'll go back to the question of what happens if you're a smaller organization and you don't have a dedicated plan giving person, a dedicated major gifts officer, et cetera, et cetera. Simply making a type of testamentary gift, a legacy gift, should be part of the conversation with every donor. So as you're working with donors and you're asking them to make a significant gift to the organization, one of the things that you should always say is, you know, a lot of our donors remember our organization in their estate plans. And, you know, I can give you a form of bequest, which you should have, or I can talk to you a little bit about how you can make a gift through your retirement plans, through your life insurance, or through various types of accounts that you have, in ways that all you have to do is go and fill out a form. It's not going to cost you anything, but you can still make the same type of significant impact to this organization as you can were you to make a bequest in a will.
Keep in mind that if you get a planned gift out of the blue, sometimes it's the result of somebody who came before you. It's very interesting to me. I see names like Bob Shafis in a relationship with somebody who has done a planned gift, or some of the other individuals who have been in my role many, many years before. It could be that, it could be somebody else they weren't even in plan giving, but they did something along the way that inspired a donor. So keep in mind that the work that you do may come to fruition years after you have left
You know,
the
and
organization.
I think there's, if I may, I think there's a flip side to that, which is that if you are entering into a plan giving program, whether you have a society or you don't have a society, you're basically entering into an agreement with that donor to steward them for the next 20 or 30 years. Now, it's not going to be you personally that's doing it, hopefully. But if it, your successors in interest over the course of time in the if I dare say this, the 2030s, 40s, and 50s are going to be stewarding these same donors. And so you need to make sure that there's a structure within the organization and a commitment to make that kind of stewardship take place.
And we've already talked about the fact that because of the way things change in the investment world and the way people have positioned their assets, these gifts can be quite surprising to you. So here are some final thoughts. Now, you could, in fact, come from a team where you've got somebody in each of these positions. At the field, I'm fortunate to have people who do all of these things, advancement services and prospect research, and other people who handle these parts, including individual giving. Or you could be, like I was in the beginning of my career, a one-person shop where I did annual giving, and I did communications, and I did major gifts and all. But always keep in mind that if you are in fact with a larger organization, make sure that you extend credit and recognition to the people who do all of these things for gifts that ultimately you might get credit for. It creates a wonderful sense of camaraderie, and it helps you in your future work when people think, oh, that was really nice of you to say that. We had a staff meeting a couple of months ago, and I and we had this moment for shout outs, and I gave a shout out to the person who does prospect research for us, who at that particular moment was just having some real uh, troubling things in her life. And she came to me later, almost in tears, and said, that really meant a lot to me that you called me out for that. So anyway, I just realized that we're all part of a team.
You know what I think is one of the most important names on that list, Bill,
Yeah.
is the content experts, is the people within your organization who are not fundraisers. Because donors see fundraisers all the time, but if you're doing something within your organization that a content expert can talk about to the donor, I think they really appreciate that.
That's a really good point, Bob. I'm sorry I didn't point that out, because we do it all the time at the field. We'll have somebody who is on the curatorial team or the collections team, and we'll do a behind the scenes tour, and they will talk about the work that they do, and that or education, and that really inspires the people that are coming in and seeing that, because you and I can become pretty knowledgeable about what the organization does, depending upon the size and the complexity. We can't know everything, and it's important to make sure that we engage those people and we make them feel good too, because interestingly enough, the people that do the behind the scenes for us aren't always necessarily the beneficiaries of the funds that we raise. They are by and large, but sometimes they'll do it behind the scenes, and then somebody will some other part of the museum. So make sure that those people are feeling very good about the work that they do for you. These are some of the things that embody the reasons. If you sat in a room and you asked 35 people, in fact, if we opened this up and said, okay, everybody give a reason why somebody gives, you will have probably at least 10 or 15 different answers. But these are some of the reasons why I've experienced people giving.
And the word that's missing here is tax. People don't give because of taxation. It's been, on every study that I've ever seen in the past 40 years, tax consequences are always fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh on the list. These things at the top of this list are what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just some other final thoughts. Years, excuse me, years ago, I worked for a gentleman who did listening seminars for major corporations. And one of my favorite takeaways from that experience from him was, and this is good for what we do, but it's also good in life, and that is, don't listen with your answer running. It's a statement, when you think about it, it embodies the fact that you will be in a conversation with somebody and they're talking, and you can't wait to say the next thing about your organization, and you lose a lot by doing that. I try to throw questions out to people and then just sit back and let them answer, and you'll be surprised just how much people will share with you if you give them that opportunity. And they'll also recognize if you are gracious, if you're genuine. That's such an important part of what we do. You all probably do the New York Times Wordle puzzle, and you all probably have your own word that you start with each day. And mine intentionally is the word grace, for two reasons. One, it has a lot of the letters that often appear, but also it is a daily reminder to me to go through my day and be that way. Don't let things knock you off that track.
No, I think that's absolutely correct. And let me quickly give you a quick example. I had a donor
Mhm.
who I asked for a bunch of money once, and he did something like this. He went like this, and then he looked up and he said yes. And so we asked him for an additional amount of money. And this time I brought the president of the organization in, and the donor did the same thing. He went like this. And the president, before the guy came up to say yes, he was going to do it, because that's what he was going to say, he said, "Oh, Dave, don't worry about it. I know economic times are hard. We'll ask you again later." At a certain point in time, the smartest thing you can do is say absolutely nothing and let the donor be the one to talk.
Absolutely. And these last 2 points, give donors more than they expect. That is such an important thing. Treat people who are contributing even small amounts of money with the greatest respect. Obviously, you can't do everything for a person who is giving you $100 that you might do for somebody who's giving you 100,000. But make sure that they value that relationship by you valuing the support that they give, and be generous in your gratitude to them and your stewardship of them. And one final thing is, I love the idea of when you're visiting somebody, look around their office, look around their home, take in that whole experience. You might find that they're a collector of art, or they might be engaged in some kind of other passion. And those are the kinds of things that you bring out in conversation, and that you take back and you incorporate into the development of that relationship. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we'll take a look at the chat and see if there are some questions in there that we would like to address.
I saved a few of them, Bill, if that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. You want to just
Sure.
call them out? Yeah.
A couple of people had said they would love to see that gift confirmation form that you have. I'm wondering if you can just drop that in the chat. I think you can attach a file to the chat here.
I can do that. Yeah.
Fancy. High tech.
Go ahead.
Another question was, the seminars that you give, are they targeting people who are likely to set aside money for planned giving, or for people who want to receive planned giving?
Bob, you want to take that one?
I'm not sure I exactly get the question, but let me talk on for a moment about the people that I have tended to invite to plan giving seminars or estate planning seminars. And they're people who are not already existing plan gift donors, although I may invite them sometimes. But I'm looking for people who have markers of good potential plan giving prospect status. What are those? Long-term giving, long-term relationship, which could involve both giving and volunteering. Any demographic data that I would have that would seem to indicate the person might be a good plan giving prospect, status as single, no children, all of those type of things, and other markers, so that the people that I am inviting to a plan giving seminar are people who look to me like they are going to be good plan giving prospects, probably for a bequest or something like that, but potentially also something for somebody who's making a gift for a gift annuity, or perhaps has a business of their own. And I know that, and so I know that they're getting on in years. And although age is not a predictor, if somebody owns a business and they're getting to be in their 60s and 70s, they're probably thinking in terms of either selling the company or doing something in order to transition it to the next generation. And there are plan giving tactics that can be utilized to make that work.
I think perhaps the other part of the question was, are there seminars for people like us who want to learn more about how to set this up? We want to receive this funds. I think that's also part of the question.
Yes, and there are like a zillion of them. Some of the organizations that Bill put on there, like Stelter and Crescendo, have a lot of seminars and things like that that are going on. A lot of the plan giving marketing providers tend to have plan giving seminars. The two of the best national programs, I think, are the American Council on Gift Annuities conference every year or two, and then the annual conference of the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners. Both of those are very, very good and have multiple presentations for different levels of expertise. And then finally, the Chicago Council on Planned Giving, which meets every month or two, usually has one or two good seminars each meeting. And over the course of time, that's a great way to get to know more and more about planned giving. And like I said, ultimately, the thing that's most important is simply telling a donor, you can make a gift through your will. Here's a copy of a bequest that will allow you to do that. That is going to help most donors in most situations do something if they are motivated to do so.
There's another really interesting question, I thought, coming from someone who works at a small organization, of how one gets started in this. Ideas about is there other readiness factors for starting a planned giving program, or articles, knowledge bases that one could turn to begin to think about that? Because I'd imagine this is a massive, daunting project for a small organization.
It doesn't have to be. And let me tell you why. Because of what I just said, which is, if you simply make a commitment to start talking to your donors about leaving something in their plans, in virtually every meeting that you have with a donor, and you leave them a copy of a charitable bequest form, that's going to go a long way to get the whole thing started. Now, a lot of organizations, especially if they have a larger donor base, and by larger, I mean 2, 3, 4,000. I'm not talking about 100,000 people. But if they have a number of people that they can begin talking to and working with, they can also make a commitment to create some sort of bequest society. And a bequest society, if you get a bequest society in the first year and you get 20 names, that is success. That's great. The only other thing that you need to do then is to continue to make that part of your annual projections. I'm going to add 10 new members to my bequest society next year. And over the course of 5 years or so, you can build that from 20 to 50 or 60 names. That's a substantial number of people to have in a bequest society for a smaller organization. But even if that number is 20 or 30, let's say, that's still a really great number. You know what the average size for a charitable bequest is in the US? $40,000 to $70,000. If you have 20 people, and just using the lower end of that range, that's, I think, $800,000. That's not small potatoes. So a combination of simply talking about leaving a bequest to an organization and possibly creating some type of legacy society is a great way for a smaller organization to start. It doesn't take a huge amount of investment. You don't need to know all the specifics of the tax laws and how these different things like charitable lead trust and remainder trust and all that stuff work. So there you go.
Just like everything, there's a ton of information out there online. There are tutorials, free tutorials. There are several presentations like ours that you can pull up information on, and also, people in this field are very willing to share information. Reach out to Bob or myself. We're happy to talk with you. I think Jennifer popped into the chat the Chicago Council on Planned Giving. It's not a huge amount of money. I think it's $140 a year to join that, but there are bi-monthly meetings as well, and you can go and have some fabulous conversations with people at those meetings. Anything else, Justin, in there?
Yeah, a couple more things.
Yeah.
One person was wondering about where one could go to get some of those statistics you were quoting about planned giving to present to their boards.
Yeah. Again, online, there are a lot of different people who post statistics about giving. Giving USA is one. There's There's the National Council on Planned Giving, National Committee on Charitable Gift Annuities. There are several places online where you would be able to find those stats. Again, if anybody wants to email me, I'm happy to share some of the resources that I have. I think at the end of the presentation, which everybody will have access to, I think there are also some links there.
I think somebody posted in the chat box a link to some of Russell James stuff. And a lot of the stuff that I quote is directly from Russell James's presentations, which combine stuff that he has done personally as well as stuff that he can reference that others have done. And there's a lot of data there.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good to know. There's one other question, but first I'm going to ask my questions.
Yeah.
I have two questions about real property. So we talked about giving property in a will or in a trust. Do you know, can someone make a charitable gift through a transfer on death instrument?
Yes, I reference that. There are two ways of doing it. You can actually execute a deed, which makes it an irrevocable transaction. There are actually tax benefits for doing that, but it is irrevocable. And then the other option in Illinois, not in every state, but in most states at this point, there's something called a transfer on death deed that is revocable.
Correct. That's the one. So you can't, because I know you can do that to give your house to an individual, for example, but you could give it to an organization.
Yes, and Illinois is kind of weird. I haven't looked at it recently, but there are some limitations on how you can use that in Illinois. I think it has to be a personal residence or something else. I forget what it is.
Right, I believe that's correct.
Yeah. So there are some limitations in Illinois.
But it's remarkably easier than doing a will, and it doesn't cost you anything. My other question about property is there any concern about, so we just inherited it, we just got this 6 flat. Now we have to fix it up and sell it, and the amount of time and money it takes to do that, is that worth the property that we received? Is that something that gets factored into these thoughts?
Yeah, I talk a lot about pre-acceptance review of any type of real estate. Because early in my career, I didn't do it, but somebody in my office accepted a building that had toxic waste on it. And the organization had to pay to clean the toxic waste before they could sell it. When I was at the Salvation Army for about 5 years, managing the planned giving program, and I would get phone calls every now and then, and they would always say the same thing. Hey, I want to give you a piece of real estate. Great, tell me about it. Well, we've been trying to sell it for the past 5 years and nobody wants to buy it, so we want to just give it to charity. I don't want that. That's just giving me your problem, not your gift. And so when I'm looking at property, you want to look and see, is it saleable? Is it toxic? Are there costs that are associated with it that your organization's going to have to pay? Taxes, cleanup, fixing, assessments of various types. That's why it's important, I think, to look at a piece of property before you have an opportunity to accept it. I think for the transfer on death thing in Illinois, I think that the transferee has a period of time where they can reject the gift. And that's an important factor for you, because if your organization gets a notice that says, hey, you've just become the owner of this piece of real estate in Rolling Meadows, you want to send somebody out to take a look at it to see if it's saleable and if it's worthwhile.
The other thing that we do at the field, we have some gift acceptance policies, and I don't have them handy, but I'm happy to share them with you. But the other part of that is that we have people on the finance team, on the board, and others who are in positions of authority to help drive what kinds of gifts we will receive and accept. And that helps you a lot, because depending upon your organization, you may have people trying to give you all sorts of things, and you may not be interested. But having policies in place like that really help you to talk with them and say, these are the kinds of things that we will accept, and these are the kinds of things that unfortunately we can't, because we don't have the capacity to do that. We don't have people on staff who could go out and do an analysis of that, you know, of the dangers of this particular field that you want to give us. So. Yeah,
that's great. And the last question, which I'm glad is last, because I think it's really, really good. Any tips on navigating the planned giving conversation away from, well, when you die, toward something else? For example, legacy building.
Yeah, again, we do a lot of what we call blended gifts. So we will talk with somebody about what they want to accomplish with their philanthropy, what kind of impact they want to have, how they want it to be shaped within the institution. And sometimes that involves doing something current. I've had a lot of people, when I've engaged them in planned giving conversations, say, well, you know, I'd really like to see something during my lifetime, as opposed to just waiting until I'm dead, and in which case I may be looking down from someplace and I can see what you've done with it, but or I may not be. So we try to work in a blended nature with gifts like that. But we also try to work with people to imagine what it's like. I'm working with this donor, one of the donors I was seeing here in Seattle, wants to give to our Egypt exhibitions. And so, you know, he and I have had some conversations about what that looks like in the future. What could possibly be the financial needs for that exhibition in the future. And that has helped him to have a much greater sense of comfort in making that gift in the distant future. Bob, you can share some things as well.
No, that's like a perfect answer. I think that's exactly on spot on.
Okay. Anything else, Justin?
That's all I see.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Justin, thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.